Let me talk with you once again about coaching those of your Sages group to interact and develop influence with those who are coming behind them. As this material was being developed, I have to confess that I didn't expect this portion to take this many videos. I thought it would probably take a couple. Okay, I've used the word, and others have used the word osmosis. Simply put, osmosis results in one thing being affected by something else. If I wear a dark suit, I have on a dark jacket just now, if I were to rub against a dusty wall, my jacket is going to be affected by the dust on the wall. Now, my jacket is not going to affect the wall, but the dust there is going to affect me because the wall has loose particles to give away. To be pollinated, many fruit trees cannot self-pollinate. They need a second tree of the species nearby. And in such cases, a tree alone produces flowers, but never produces fruit. So the proximity of these two trees becomes a benefit to both of them. Each tree has something to give the other. In the chemistry class, there may have been a time when there was a compound in a test tube and it sat there, nothing happening. And then your instructor poured a tiny amount of another chemical into that test tube where nothing is happening. And suddenly there is smoke and there's a flash and there's a reaction. There's change. Osmosis, a dusty wall affecting a dark suit. Osmosis, two trees impacting each other, resulting in fruitfulness for both. Osmosis, chemicals come together and there's a reaction. In everything that I've described, the change that is called osmosis involves proximity and direct interaction. I want you to think about this. Who and what the arriving generations come in contact with is going to determine what they become and the outcome of their lives in fulfilling the purpose of Christ. So for you and for your sages, are you going to be an example and lead people in your group toward this process of osmosis? Will you show your sage group how to help the arriving generation bear much fruit? As an influencer, are you going to produce a positive reaction in those coming behind you? Let me give you a Bible example, and I'd never really put this together in my mind until I was just driving toward the studio today, but let me give you a Bible example of the power of proximity. Jacob had fled from his brother, and he ended up down with his relative by the name of Laban, and he ends up married. And in time, the relationship between Jacob and his father-in-law, Laban, became tense. Laban and his sons felt that Jacob had become wealthy at their expense. So the tension was high. The two men negotiated a settlement, and the idea was that Jacob was a good worker, and it seemed that favor had come to them because he was there. And Jacob would continue to feed and keep Laban's livestock. In exchange for this, Jacob would become the owner of any spotted and speckled livestock that would be born going forward. But before the agreement was to take effect, all of the spotted, speckled, and ring-straked livestock were taken from the herd, and they were moved 3 days' journey away. There could be no accidents in this. And Laban and his sons, they were so agreeable to this, because even then there was the understanding that unspotted livestock are going to produce solid covered calves and lambs. And so Jacob is now caring for livestock where every animal has no spots and has no speckles. When the separation was complete, Jacob gathered the rods or the sticks from 3 different trees, and he cut through the bark, leaving each stick striped and spotted. So white wood shone through the bark. And then Jacob took those striped sticks and put them in the gutters of the water trough, and his livestock walked up to the trough to drink. They were looking at striped sticks, and when an animal lifted its head from drinking, it saw striped sticks. And in the presence of striped sticks, brown cows joined with brown bulls, and there was conception. And brown cows and brown bulls should have brown calves, but that's not what happened. Many of the calves born were spotted and speckled, to the point that Laban and his sons would quickly begin to complain that Jacob was doing something improper. I want you to think about it. What the cattle saw affected what they produced. What they saw affected what they produced. What am I putting in front of our 15-year-olds? What am I putting in front of single adults? What am I putting in front of young married couples? What am I putting in front of men who are going through midlife crisis? To what degree is the productivity of the arriving generations going to be determined by what they see in the sage group that you influenced? The livestock did not view these striped and spotted sticks at a distance, but they were close. The sticks were in the gutters where the water spilled out, and they didn't want it to be lost. This is desert country. And so they were right there, just right in front of them. What they saw affected what they produced. Jacob's strategy eventually included something more. He soon identified the strong and separated them from the weak. And he put striped sticks in front of the watering trough of the strong. And the strong bulls and calves produced striped and spotted calves. What they saw affected what they produced. Those coming behind us will seldom become, and they will seldom do, what they have never seen and observed someone else do. The outcome of Jacob's osmosis strategy, the Bible says that he increased exceedingly much cattle, maidservants, men servants, camels, and asses. Osmosis, one generation to another. Putting something in front of them that talks about revivals of the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, that talks about God bringing them through deep crisis and struggles and the era of the Vietnam War and racial discrimination and hatred tearing our land apart. What they see will affect what they become and what they produce in their lives. This idea of osmosis, and I'll use a different word for the moment, mentorship, is not well understood. Mentorship is not a structured set of lessons. Instead, it's the protege having their questions answered by their mentor. It's Jesus walking and talking with the disciples. That's osmosis. That's mentorship. It was just being with them. Some of the sages in your group who are going to most impact those coming behind are quiet people. They're not good public speakers. But the arriving generation has become a bit cynical about sages who are up on the stage. What they really are looking for, it seems, is they're looking for a guide who will walk along by their side. And the quietest of your people can do that. Mentorship does not have to happen in an office or cafe. As I look back, I most impacted some people while we were sweating, setting up fireworks stands, or running electricity where there would be lights in a baby church. And I think about the man that helped me with that, Robert and I. Neither one were electricians, and later when the wind would blow just right, the lights would flicker on and off because we were not electricians. But those connections were like the two trees I've talked about, where that there is cross-pollination. I benefited, and those I was spending time with benefited as well. Mutual benefit. Not me being the fount of all wisdom, but learning. And that's what I want to do from the arriving generation. I learn from their questions. I learn from their observations. And yes, when I say to Caden or Wyatt, our two grandsons, or even now Elsie, our 7-year-old granddaughter, show me how to do this on my phone. Instead of showing me how, they just do it. And I still don't know how to get it done. But I learn from them, and hopefully I'm putting something into them as well. If we're going to influence them, and listen, I don't know if there's anything, as a matter of fact, I don't think there's anything more important in the vision of sages than what I've spent these 4 sessions talking about. We can't let wisdom continue to die without transference. And you lead a local group, and you can make that happen. Please do so. And when you have ideas that cause it to come to pass them on to me, pass them on to others. Let's do this thing together.